what has happened in Europe, in Italy, the debate between Jeffrey Sachs and the Italian senator Carlo Calenda. And here is what they said, just to understand the tone, the main objective, because they were talking about the root causes of the conflict in Ukraine. And here is what they said, what he said, Carlo Calenda.
Incredible.
È incredibile.
You don't know how much the United States
Non sa quanto gli Stati Uniti hanno pagato per il rovesciamento di Yanukovych. Ero lì, l'ho visto. Io sono stato portato in piazza Maidan dalle persone che hanno pagato.
Parlate in italiano, grazie.
Io ero...
Senator, now it's my turn.
Ma ora tocca a me, senatore.
Prego, professor Sachs.
Lei non c'era quando io sono stato portato in giro. Mi hanno spiegato, abbiamo dato 15.000 a questo, 20.000 a quest'altro. Sta dicendo che non è successo, che non l'ho sentito?
Sì, penso che lei sta mentendo. Esattamente come sul vaccino. E posso dire una cosa?
Un attimo, uno per volta, prego.
È odioso, veramente odioso.
Sarà odioso, ma io penso che lei fa... assolutamente.
Sì, sta chiamando un bugiardo.
Io penso che lei fa propaganda putiniana.
I'm stunned.
Sono scioccato, francamente.
È la mia opinione.
You call me a liar?
Sì.
Mi ha chiamato un bugiardo?
Però, facciamo una cosa. Sulla lettura dei fatti di Maidan sono stati scritti libri, inchieste.
Sì.
Ci sono posizioni molto diverse.
Ma mica tanto.
Non per forza una posizione o l'altra significa che uno mente e uno dice.
Ma lei ha fatto 20 trasmissioni su Maidan,
Cioè,
raccontando come gli ucraini volevano essere europei. Ma io me le ricordo quelle trasmissioni. E allora si è fatto prendere in giro anche lei? Era un complotto americano.
Io ho raccontato quello che è successo, senatore.
Lei quando copriva l'Euromaidan, perché io me le ricordo quelle trasmissioni, andava lì, no? Non raccontava dei ragazzi ucraini che volevano diventare europei.
Ma lì ci sono stati, ma certamente
e
ci
erano
sono
tutti
stati
pagati
ragazzi
dalla CIA. E come mai, se scusi, faccio un'altra domanda. L'esercito ucraino in Crimea non aveva le pallottole, tanto che gli obini verdi di Putin l'hanno presa in 2 minuti. C'erano gli americani in Crimea?
Professor Sachs, professore, il dibattito in Italia è molto acceso, a volte troppo, però diciamo, dica la sua, non si preoccupi, abbiamo superato.
No, è acceso, ma è veramente scioccante. Chiedo scusa.
He was shocked by the way the level of argument on the part of the Italian senator. He came out and saying, "You are a liar." Instead of providing any sort of evidence to back his sort of argument, he was putting, what's going to, because when it comes to this sort of argument, Colonel, is the hardcore, is the foundation, is the root cause of the problem. And they're trying to manipulate it as much as they can. What's your take on that?
Well, I'm currently writing another book about the whole issue and the whole process that led to the war, and it's basically a book about the peace process. But in any case, so I just went back on all these events of the Euromaidan. And it's very important to understand that, first of all the documents I'm using, I use not a single Russian document to do that, all Ukrainian documents. And all these documents at that time explained exactly what Professor Jeffrey Sachs is saying. Ukrainian documents. So that means that the senator is in fact lying. You see, it's very important. And when he said, for instance, that Ukrainians were in majority in favor of Europe, this is totally wrong. This is totally wrong. In fact, the Kiev International Institute for Sociology made a survey at that time. I mean, we are talking about the end of 2013. And at that time, the number of people in favor of joining the EU were about 50%, exactly 50%. So, and the reason for that is not a question of those who were pro-Putin, it was nothing to do with that. The issue was that as the Ukraine considered joining the EU, the government realized that most of the Ukrainian industry was tailored, because this is an industry that was a legacy industry and economy coming from the Soviet Union. And at that time, the whole industry was tailored to work with other Soviet republics. Typically, the example I take always with the Antonov. You had turbines, engines for aircraft that were made in Ukraine. And they were made for Russian aircraft, not for Western aircraft. You see, because they're not the same engines. And this is just an example. You have many others, by the way, and that reflects in what happened just in 2023, as Ukraine started, or when European wanted to have more the cereals and wheat and all that, the grain sold to Europe, Europe refused. And in fact, they put some countries, European countries, put a ban on Ukrainian cereals because they don't have the same quality. They are not made for the European market. And you have a lot of products like this. Doesn't mean that Ukraine was not able to adjust to the market, but obviously it required a lot of time before being ready for the European market. And that's exactly what the government of Yanukovych realized. And for that reason, they explored options, and I'm talking about 2013 now. And they explored options to maintain the custom union they had with Russia, and an agreement with the European Union. And therefore, so Ukraine could have benefited from the custom union with Russia. At the same time, they would have benefited from a custom union with the European Union, if you want. And they were about to sign an agreement, but then who refused to have this kind of tripartite solution, which, by the way, was proposed by the Ukrainian government in agreement with the Russian government, obviously, and the Russian government never argued against the Ukraine joining the European Union. They said, we have absolutely no problem with that. Of course, we want to keep our own interests, and therefore, kind of a triangular relation would have been optimal. But that was a proposal and you had a working group established by Ukrainian government to study that. But who refused that? European Union. They said there is no way. It's either Russia or Europe. There is no way in between. And that was Manuel José Barroso, the predecessor of Ursula von der Leyen, who said so. Said either or, but not both at the same time. And that created a problem for the Ukrainian government. As a result, the Ukrainian government asked for a pause in the negotiation because they had to reconsider how to adjust to that, because that was a problem for their industry. The Ukrainian industry was not ready, was not Europe ready, if you want. And therefore, they asked for a pause in the negotiation to study alternative solutions. But they insisted, and the government of Yanukovych, including Yanukovych himself, said publicly that there was absolutely no change in the direction of the government. They still want to join the EU, but they just have to adjust the modalities to join the EU in order to accommodate the Ukrainian industry. And that's exactly that at that point that you started to have the Maidan. And in the Maidan, when we talk about Maidan, and that's where the Italian senator is dishonest. Because in fact, you had two Maidans. The first Maidan was a kind of peaceful protest done by the civil society, I mean, just people like you and me, who went on the streets and demonstrated peacefully. And just to show that they were in favor of maintaining the process with European Union. And that's what happened. And what suddenly you had a change, in fact, in the pattern of the Euromaidan. And here again, if you look at what the Kiev Institute for Sociology made, they made a survey about the population. They made it in early December 2013, and at the end, I think it was on the 7th and 8th of December 2013, and another survey in end of December 2013. And they noticed that, and the polls shows exactly if you look at the results, it's very clear that the population in both occasions were not the same. The first Maidan until mid-December was, as I said, family people and very peaceful people. And after the mid-December, it changed. These were people coming from the western part of Ukraine, namely the part which is not Ukrainian, not ethnic Ukrainian. And that's very important, because if you look at the map of Ukraine, you will see that the area which is called Galicia is in fact a remnant of the former Austro-Hungarian Empire that was dismantled at the end of World War I. And those people who are there, and they are still in the area of Lvov, Ivano-Frankovsk, and Ternopil. And those people are not ethnic Ukrainians, if you want, in a certain, I mean, depending on what you consider as Ukrainian. But these were people who were from, first of all, they are not Orthodox, they are Catholics. It's very important. This is the only Catholic part of Ukraine, by the way. And they always, these are the ones who had very ambiguous relationship with the Germans during World War II, if I can summarize this like this. And the rest of Ukraine, which is both Ukrainian and Russian speaking, both roughly half-half. These were, in fact, at the beginning of Maidan, the first Maidan, you had mostly those people coming from the rest of Ukraine. But the second Maidan, and the Maidan that became violent, were people coming from this former region of Galicia. And by the way, this is the name that the SS division, the 14th Grenadier SS Division Galizien, Erste Galizien, that was the SS division made out of those people. And I remind you, they have a different religion than others. They are ethnically different from the rest of the, but these were the ones who took over Maidan. And that Maidan became violent, extremely violent. And this is exactly where you had the killings and all that. And we know all these, the people who were killed and all that. And you had, in 2023, you had a tribunal, a court, a Ukrainian court that courted those people who were allegedly responsible for the killings. I mean, Ukrainian police, which were alleged to have killed people on order from the government, I mean, Yanukovych. And there were some people who were indicted, I mean, considered as a culprit, although those who were considered a culprit had already been delivered by Zelensky to the Donbass Republic. They have been extradited already. So they said those people from the Berkut police, and they had left already Ukraine in a certain sense. And what the court established is that there had been no order whatsoever coming from Yanukovych to kill demonstrators, and that the people who had been killed during I'm talking about a very specific massacre that happened, and they noticed that at the time of that massacre, the shootings came from the Hotel Ukraina, who was at that time in the hands of those people coming from the extreme west of Ukraine. So that was established by Ukrainian court just 2 years ago. So we don't need to have any Russian literature to demonstrate that the whole thing that happened in Maidan had been a coup engineered by the West. And this is, I don't know how people, I have heard, and Jeffrey Sachs mentioned people who have been paid. I haven't digged into that. I don't know if people were paid to demonstrate. I don't know. But what I know is that those who have been involved in violence, who eventually led to the toppling of the government, these people didn't come from the mainstream Ukrainians, but they came from the extreme right wing, the ultra-nationalists coming from the ultra-nationalist faction of the western part of Ukraine. And on the 21st of February 2014, the thing had evolved in the country, and you had all these disturbance and all that. And the government accepted, they negotiated with the demonstrators and accepted to have new elections and to remove all the police forces from the street and security forces.